Adam Schumacher says the following. Having avoided serious injury from my hobbies for 40 years, congratulations, I landed myself in the ER last week for the first sutures of my life after an accident with a kitchen knife. Ouch. Waiting for the doctor, I realized that anytime I've hurt myself, it hasn't been due to unsafe practices or lack of protective equipment. It's always been complacency. When you, he says to me, when you are doing a potentially dangerous task 1,000 times without incident, how to keep yourself vigilant for the 1,001st? That is a terrific question. There's an old axiom that beginning helicopter pilots never crash. It's always older helicopter pilots. Now, I warn you that I have not researched this aphorism. It is really something that was prime material for Mythbusters. Well, I'm not sure exactly how you test it, but it is like, I've heard this so many times from engineers. Like, oh, beginning helicopter pilots never crash. It's complacency. I'd love to know if it's actually true or false. So I think I'll look into that. Hold on. Look into this. But I try to not be complacent where my hands and my body are concerned. And I do that by thinking about future me. So I said in my book, Every Tool's a Hammer, that when I sweep up in here, when I clean my workbench surfaces and I sweep up the shop, I am, hold on, sorry, I spilled a thing. That when I sweep up the shop, I am giving a gift to future me. And that the next morning when I walk in, future me, or that moment present me, walks in and says, damn, look at this nice shop. I can't wait to get to work. Thank you, past me. I think the same thing I have that same conversation with myself every time I use the table saw. Every single time. When I am using the table saw, which, by the way, like, is maybe the most used tool in this shop, and it's the one that I hate the most because it's so scary. I know. Some of you have comments about how I use the table saw. That's fine. But every time I use the table saw, I literally picture myself falling on it. I picture clowns with greased ball bearings walking into the room and spilling them all over the floor and me like losing my balance. And so every time I use the table saw, I like spread my feet off angles so my center of gravity is above them. When I'm coming up to the table saw, I make sure that I'm not leaning one way or the other, that my bias is directly over my center. And as I feed it in, I'm thinking about the position of my hands and how the work maybe could throw my hand into the blade. And if I have any suspicion that could happen, I choose another methodology like the sled, or I clamp a piece in place. It's worst case scenario prognosticating is a key part of making. I hadn't considered that before, but it really is a key part of making. It was a regular practice at Mythbusters, right? Because every time we were doing something, we had to then get an insurance company to insure us to do it. And when an insurance company is going to pay out money for that or take a risk, they're going to want to know, how bad could it be? And so for every single thing we ever did on the show, we spent some time workshopping what's the worst possible case scenario. But frankly, when I'm building something small, okay, like this is a cast replica of an Apollo joystick, of an Apollo era NASA joystick. I bought this apparently from a guy named John Kelly on eBay, and I am going to make a replica piece of NASA equipment with this. When I do that, I'm going to want to mill out the inside of this a bit in order to fit a real switch in. And when I'm going to do that, I am thinking about all the different worst case scenarios. One of them is if I clamp it too hard and I mar the outsides, or it seems to be cast in a semi-brittle resin, will it shatter? If I drop a big milling bit down here, is it going to rattle itself out? So should I pre-drill with Forstner bits or even annular cutters? Each of these choices I'm going to be making is all about prognosticating the worst possible case scenario and how that will bone me. I only have one of these. I mean, he might be selling other castings of this on eBay, but I only have one right now. And so I have to consider, with everything I do to it, how I'm going to destroy it. And I think that exercise keeps you frosty. I mean, you say that the only times you've injured yourself have been complacency. Frequently when I bone a build, when I'm like almost done with a paint job and I put a thumbprint in it, that's also complacency. That's like, is this dry? Let me just, oh no, it's not dry. Crap, now I have to redo this paint job. That's totally happened. I will also say, the other day I was using this really beautifully sharp Japanese chisel, which needs some resharpening after I used it. I was using it to flush up some things, and I was pushing it kind of hard. Whenever you're pushing a bladed thing, whenever you're applying force, real force to a sharpened edge, you have to be considering where that thing is going to go. Are both your hands? Is one hand in the way? Could you do this? Could you spill it and drop and cut your leg? Seriously, this chisel, if I dropped it and my leg was in the way, it would cut me on its way down. There's more to this answer than I thought when I first read your question, Adam Schumacher. And it's really specifically because there is that mindset of, how is this going to go poorly? And how can I stop it from going poorly? Which I submit is the main skill that experience gives you. You have a better intuition about how to stop something from going poorly with experience, because you've done so many things to make things go poorly. You have taken so many paths that ended up screwing you over. You've learned how wide the disaster cone could be from your activities. So really what this is about is what I think of as the proper stance for making things, for the making of things, which again is anytime you use your point of view to make something from nothing. It doesn't have to be material. But whenever you're making things and you are really in the flow of that making, you are in a state of really like, you're thinking about what's happening, you're thinking about what's happening next, you're seeing into the future a little bit, you're recapitulating your past into the narrative of what you're making perhaps, but you're in that zone of really thinking about not just the one task you're doing, but how that task fits into the build. And that same stance is what keeps me safe from my tools here in the cave. Yeah, I think that's really true. And it hadn't occurred to me before I started answering this question. Vigilance. You ask, how do you keep vigilant for the 1001st time you've done something? It's vigilance. You literally have a stance in your space of like, this is what I'm doing. It's not a thing I'm doing on my way to do another thing. So many times I've boned a build because like, oh, I've got 15 more minutes before dinner. Let me just run downstairs and add this one thing. That's when I screw things up. When I don't pay respect to the space of the making. And that's also when I injure myself. Lastly, I will say that whenever I cut one of my hands with one of my other hands, which is a classic injury, there's always the instant before the injury is, I wonder if I'm doing this a little too, and then the injury happens every single time. Yeah. All right, let's see here. Someone asks, what is the sign language on top of my sandpaper rack? I have these mannequin hands up there that I bought because I was hoping to do some posable gloves. That was a disaster. These are the wooden posable mannequin hands you can buy on Amazon for about 20 bucks. They're beautiful, but they don't actually spread, so they only move like this. So when you put them on a glove, even the large size looks terrible. They just don't look great, and they don't pose gloves very well. I thought they would be a solution for some of my space glove display. Instead, I'm having to go a totally different route for my Space Club display. As for what their sign language is, the first one is this. I don't know what letter that is. The second one is this. The third one is this, which might be R. I can't remember my letter sign language. And the fourth one is this. I didn't set those up like that. Somebody else in here. I don't know whether it was Freddie or Jen or Mel or Norm. Could have been anybody adjusted those hands. I have no idea. There is no message to be communicated by the posable hands. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.